So today I want to talk about why I think every fully on-chain game should be a roll-up, and I'm hoping we can also have like a bit of a conversation. It's just not just me talking at you, but I'm gonna give you some arguments and also tell you that unfortunately today it's really difficult for an on-chain game to be a roll-up, but hopefully we can do some things to get into that direction. So here are some like challenges of fully on-chain games, and I think a lot of you are building this game, so this might be pretty familiar to you. I'm trying to see if I can remove this annoying thing. Okay, well, let's just maybe just go. There we go. So the first like limitation is that these games might generate a lot of transaction, and so there might be a lot of throughput on the blockchain, especially if hopefully your games gets popular. And we already have reports of people building games that existing blockchain don't really fit their need, or if they don't destroy the blockchain per se, they will destroy the RPC infrastructure or things like that. So it helps to have your own isolated infrastructure. Relating to that is gas isolation. So if you're in a blockchain, right, even if it has high throughput, if someone decides to do an NFT drop that's super popular, then your game is unplayable for a few hours, and that's not good. I think most games want their transaction to be free, unless they're like super financialized. If you want to onboard someone that's new to crypto, maybe hasn't used your chain of choice, etc., you just want them to be able to try the game for free with no commitments. And for that, the gas needs to be free, which also means it needs to be cheap. You can subsidize it, but you want to preserve money, of course. You want your game to be decentralized. That's sort of the point of building on the blockchain is nobody controls it. There's some kind of community ownership. If there's just a kill switch, if the game runs on your server at home that you have to pay for and you stop paying and the game dies, that's not great. Same thing I already said, you want to keep costs low. You don't want to go out of business, make your money go a long way. If someone is new to the blockchain, and if you ask them, say, okay, to play my game, you first need to install Metamask. Remember this 12-page password, print it out, put it on your underwear. Then also go to your bank account, wire money to Ethereum, and then bridge it to the game rollup. Like that's a big problem. Games may have secret information. This is not so much rollup related, but I think rollup can help. And so you need zero knowledge proof for hiding secret information. I think games should be on blockchain so that they can be extensible. This is debatable, but for me, it's the most exciting thing. And I think rollups can help with that. And then liquidity. I don't think we really have time to talk about that one, but if that's something you're concerned about, if you say, well, I don't want to put my game on a rollup because there's no liquidity, I have ideas for that, so you can come talk to me about that. So rollups mostly help. Like the most obvious thing is like it's cheaper, and you will be in charge of the gas, and you will have the whole throughput of the blockchain to yourself, right? That's the kind of the first 4 points. And the numbers, just refer to the numbers in here, by the way, just like saying, hey, we hit 1, 2, 4. And like, you can also, because you control the blockchain, you can change the implementation of the node software to add whatever you want to customize the blockchain. You're not limited to the vanilla EVM. Especially one thing you can do that's really easy is just take the EVM, or something else that exists, right? Like if you want to do Cairo VM or whatever, you can do that. But then you can add new precompiles, right? It's like fake contracts that add custom features that will work for your game, right? So something that's very useful is to add new ZK precompiles that make it feasible to use advanced zero knowledge scheme that are not economical to do on the EVM today. Another form of customizability is something called a ticking chain that like automatically generates transaction every block that you don't have to sign. So this helps for words that are autonomous, needs to evolve by themselves. So all this you could also get all this with a chain, right? So why am I saying a rollup specifically, which is a specific kind of chain that's related to a L1, usually Ethereum, but not always. And my thesis here is that rollups are cheaper, and they provide you better security per unit of cost and effort. So no matter how much effort and cost you put in, you're going to be better off with a rollup rather than a chain. And a part of that is like, what are the costs and what are the efforts you need to put in to do a rollup? I would say the main cost is paying for your validators, or in the case of rollups, these are called sequencers. These are mostly the people you need to pay. So these are the people that receive transactions and create blocks. You need to have, if you want to be really decentralized, not have a single point of failure, you need multiple of these people. And you need to find them, that's effort, and you need to pay them, that's cost. And we'll see how I think we can tackle these challenges. And also the opportunity to use these sequencers to do some really good stuff. So if you have your own chain, you need validators. If you have your rollup, you need sequencers. In both cases, these need to be staked such that they cannot do malicious actions. And there's two ways you can stake. Basically, you can stake your own token. That's great because it's money you're printing. So that's always nice. The problem is, these people are staking your token, so they're acquiring your token, and they're exposed to the volatility of your token. Because they're taking this very high risk, they will demand a high compensation. They will demand, like, I don't know, 50% return per year or something crazy like that. And so that's annoying because even though you're printing this money, this is still money you could spend otherwise if you didn't have to pay the validators. The other approach is take an existing token like Ethereum. People might be very comfortable holding Ethereum. The problem is there's many ways for them to get return on Ethereum. They can stake their Ethereum, right? And so you need to pay them a competitive rate that's higher than the return on staking, on the return of these other things. So the solution to this sort of conundrum is to use something called restaking, where someone's already validating Ethereum, and they're staking their ETH to do that. And you say, well, also validate my thing, my rollup, be a sequencer in my rollup, and I will pay you extra on top of the return you already get. In that case, you can afford to pay them less than the competitive rate because it's all additive. And if they want, they can like validate 10 things and get stack like 10 returns on top of each other. And if they cheat on any of those, they'll get slashed. The thing though is that if you want to restake ETH, for instance, that needs to happen on Ethereum. And so almost by definition, as soon as you have that mechanism of security, you become an L2 because the security is like, oh, bridging the result of my blockchain to Ethereum, right? If you don't do that, then you have a bridge in the system, and then the weak point is sort of this bridge. So this is something that makes L2 cheaper than L1s, and that's very exciting. The other thing, so this was cost, and the other thing is effort. So if I'm a small game developer and I say, okay, this makes sense, I want my game to be a rollup, but now I need to find like partners to run my nodes. And as a small game developer, I might go to Alchemy and like, hey, Mr. Alchemy, can you run my node? And I'm like, who are you? Fuck off. Or it's people that are not very trusted, etc. So my idea is to set up a marketplace where all the people interested in sequencing will go and be registered and bonded there. And then all the people that have rollups that need sequencing will say, hey, here's my bounty for sequencing. And here's the hash of the node software. And by the way, on the forum somewhere on the internet, I'll give you a link to download the node software that matches the hash. So just run that. And if you sequence properly, I'll reward you on the smart contracts. And so if we do that, then suddenly doing a rollup becomes cheap and it becomes super easy because it's just like a simple procedure of subscribing, publishing my node software, and then letting people be like, hey, this is cool, I can earn some rewards. This guy seems legit, let me sign up for it. This might not fit everybody. Some people say, maybe I don't want random people to validate me, maybe I want conditions. And you could also implement something like that if you wanted to. You could even do permissions, but I'm trying to make things as easy as possible for really the small guy that has no time, no resources, and wants things to be easy at first. Okay, this is getting super technical, but there's something called shared sequencing. So decentralized sequencing is there's not a single guy that decides which transaction goes into the block. There is a rolling system or a random selection such that nobody can choke the blockchain. Nobody can censor you, right? And if your game has financial interest, this is pretty important. Shared sequencing is taking the same idea but taking it a step further, where the same sequencers are decided on the blocks of multiple rollups. And once you do that, what you can do is that you can do cross-chain transactions that are secure and they're fast. Because the same guy is like sequencing multiple things, and say you want to bridge from one object from one game to the other. If you submit this, you say, okay, I want to do this thing, so this transaction on this rollup to lock the sword, and this transaction that will roll up to mint the sword on the other chain. And if it doesn't include both of these transactions, if you don't succeed, that's a slashing condition in our decentralized system. So if there's cheating, then automatically the sequencer gets slashed, and also maybe the blocks are invalid. You can also implement that. And so bridging is a huge problem right now with rollups and with all chains in general. Like rollups make it really easy to go from the layer 1, so the key blockchain like Ethereum, to the layer 2 like Optimism, Arbitrum. Going back though requires 7 days to have the full security. Or you need to use economic bridges, but these get hacked every 2 months on average. So problems. And this is a lot more secure because you would be relying on all the sequencers which are bonded. So instead of relying on a 5 out of 9 multisig, you'd be relying on maybe a few tens or a few hundreds of sequencers, depending on what you want to do. And also, if they actually cheat you, they also actually lose a bunch of money that potentially you can even set aside to repay the people that have been hacked or something. So this is a little bit more technical, and I'm talking about this tomorrow at the Modeler Summit, but you can also just ask me about it. I'm like super excited about this. I think this is what really makes the world where all the games and all the other applications are their own rollup really work. Because if everybody is like its own separate island, it doesn't really work. But if you can talk really fast between all these rollups, then suddenly that's super interesting. So rollups are amazing, but today you can't really do any of this because everything sucks. There's only one thing you can use to deploy your own rollups today. It's the OP stack. There's no competition. Hopefully, there should be some competition. Like, I would encourage people to compete. It's also, by default, very centralized. There's no fault proof. OP Labs is working on them, so hopefully soon we'll have them. There's no decentralized sequencing, what I just talked about. This is not too hard to implement, honestly. And so I'll be working on it, and I'm looking for people to work on it with me. And I already started gathering people, mostly outside of gaming, mostly like bridges, companies that do like ZK bridges and things like that. But I'd love to have people that actually want to use this stuff for their games. That would be amazing. And if you want to deploy OP stack today, it's just a ton of DevOps work. It's kind of annoying, so I want to make that better also. And so because of all this, like when people want to actually use rollups for the game, which they do, right? Like there's going to be a talk by Primodium right after this. They're deploying their game as a rollup on Caldera, which is a rollup as a service provider. There's also Conduit, Altlayer. There's a few of those. And they're getting traction, I would say, in the game community. But the problem is it still has all these problems. Like mostly they're using the OP stack. And those that not using the OP stacks, there are a few, but they haven't launched yet. So it's like still TBD. And so it's still centralized. You still basically have a single point of failure, which is the rollup provider. Also, it's not clear once you start using them if it's easy to migrate away. So I want something that's like fully open source, open stack. You can just deploy that anywhere. You control everything, and you're not dependent on anybody. You just have service providers, a little bit like the RPC servers, right? If the RPC protocol is open source, you can just, if you're not happy with Alchemy, you can go to Infra. If you're happy with Infra, you can go to Anchor, whatever. You can always change. These are like fully replaceable. And I think that's how it should be for the infrastructure provider for games and rollups as well. So yeah, I'm trying to work on this. So I received an OP Labs grant. No, Optimism Governance is not the same thing. To work on DevOps to spin OP stack rollup easily. So it will be like a repo. There will be a few commands. Super easily spin a testnet with like a sequencer, etc. And also things to spin things in production and configure it really easily with like a command line wizard. So I'm committed to doing that. Like I'm going to receive money for it. I'm also, this is actually the next slide. Sorry, this is like this. This is my grant. This slide is more about the sequencing that I was telling you about. Yeah, I want to work on that, basically. I just already told you about it. And yeah, so if you're interested in working on this, if you're interested in using this, if you're interested in funding this because you have a use for it, or you're just a rich person that is looking to do good in the world, you know, I'm sure you'll all be rich someday, you know, like, straightforward. Just kidding. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do here. Okay, some other cool ideas for rollups. Let's keep the hype going. So, how much can you do on our rollup today? Like just pure EVM, no optimization. I know there's a lot of more approaches, right? You could do something that's not EVM, etc. But I'm just keeping with the pure basic because that's also what's easy to do with the OP stack. You could do 5 million gas per second. And that's sort of what Binance Smart Chain does. And that's sort of my mental limit for the thing that you can do. That's the limit of recklessness. Like after that, you start running into a, I think they did it a little bit more and they lowered it. After that, you start running into all kinds of issue. Like I said, there's like alternatives, there's like non-EVM. You could also, like what takes time on the EVM is merkleizing everything and accessing the disk to do that. If you do different schemes, you can go faster, but then you can't have like clients, you can't have storage proof. So there's a space of design trade-offs that you can have. But if you do EVMs this, so it's like 500 TPS. There are swaps, right? A swap is a very simple thing compared to most game actions, so let's keep that in mind. But what can you do if you don't have enough? Just have more rollups for your game, right? And this is like in-game what's called sharding. So you could, you know, if you, I don't know, if an MMORPG, and your MMORPG has multiple regions, you could put every region on their own rollup. And so the game proceeds on every region, and then if a player wants to go from a region to another, you just transfer him from one rollup to the other. And this is possible if you have this shared sequencing I was telling you about. Like the bridging from the player from one region to the other should be instantaneous. Otherwise, if he has to wait 10 minutes or 7 days, that's not gonna fly. You could also split by like system. So if you have an economic system that can be on its own rollup, that's maybe more secure. And the the battle logic or the game logic can be in another rollup that maybe uses different customizations also, right? You could do your financial stuff in the EVM, and then you could use a very like bare metal approach for your game logic. So that's a cool thing to do, like just have multiple rollups for your things. That's not rollup, but also cool is like optimistic execution. So like I didn't say that, but I'm personally working on a card game, a fully on-chain trading card game, a little bit like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering. And so in this game, people duel. They have a duel of cards. There's really no reason for all that information to be on the blockchain unless you want to replay or things like that. So people could just play off-chain. And as long as they agree on the outcome, they post the result to the chain. But if they disagree, what they could do is say, okay, we're not agreeing on the result, so let's just re-execute everything on the blockchain. And so only in the worst case do you go to the blockchain. And then the person that was disagreeing and that was wrong might be penalized in some way. And I think there also like there's like initiatives to sort of do that, like execute the EVM in the browser. So that way you can have a single version of the code that lives on-chain for the worst case, but then you also execute the same version on the code on the client in peer-to-peer. And then, only when things go wrong, you go to the blockchain. So there's some cool ideas I like to think about. But yeah. So another idea, like people ask me about gas, how I want to make games free, etc. So there's a conundrum there. You could just say, oh, my chain has 0 gas cost. Cool. That's like very nice if only your code is running on the blockchain. I want my games to be extensible, so other people need to be able to deploy code. And then I don't want for it to be 0 cost to run other people's code that might be very expensive or very malicious. Well, they can't really do harm, but it might incur costs to me or to the sequencers. So you still want gas, and probably what you want to do is sponsor the people that are interacting with the core game contract. Those will be free because I'm paying for them with my token or whatever. The thing is, like, if the community extends your game and it's cool, and you just try it and you look at the code, it's like this is legit. You just add them to the whitelist basically, so that it's also free to play. And so there's a community process where anybody can just extend your game on your rollup. It's probably going to be cheap, but there will be a need to pay gas, or maybe they can sponsor it themselves. Like that's also something they can do. They can say, I'm going to pay for people to try my extension. And once it gets traction, or once you see it and you say this is cool, then you can just make it free also. And to do all this, we use ERC 4237, so that's account abstraction or smart contract, where essentially instead of giving user an EOA, you give them a smart contract, and there's a way for them to sign transactions that are not really Ethereum transaction that you submit to the contract, and then these things do things on chain. And there's a thing called a paymaster that lets you sponsor these transactions so that user don't have to pay gas. Yeah, another way to save, I don't know why this bullet is here honestly, but like another way to save cost is to use a cheaper data availability solution. So like that's where you post the transaction data. I don't know if you guys know about Rollup. If this is super confusing to you, just come ask me after and I'll explain everything. But there are ways to save a lot of cost compared to even Optimism. Like Optimism's a Rollup costs like 10 cents per transaction. You can do a lot cheaper than that today. It's like a solved issue. You can also use account abstraction so that users don't need to install Metamask. I think Jerome has a talk on Alembic, which is sort of one of these solutions. Yeah, so that's all great stuff. And yeah, so an example of what you could do, there's maybe better solutions, but you create a smart account for users, you store one key on their device, and you store one key on your own servers. It's not ideal because it's like a 1 out of 2, so you can still like steal everything the user has. But then later you say, oh, add your phone to that. So now it's a 2 out of 3. So now you can't do anything, which is the key on the server. And you reward them. Say, hey, you'll get free cards if you add Metamask. That's like a good way to get the user to care about its own security. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, I think rollups, like in the long term, this is where we're going. Today it's difficult, so let's try and make it happen in a way that's like pragmatic. Like, where can we help right now in a way that like is useful, actually useful today for people? And yeah, I'm gonna be working personally on DevOps and then also on Sequencer. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.